Chapter 1. It starts in a bar. Why do 4 out of 5 relationships start in the most random places? Places like in the park, at a store, at a restaurant, or even walking down the street. Those places all seem alright. But where was I today? At a bar, a non-smoking bar. I bet you can guess what I was really craving right then, a cigarette. Sighed and drummed my fingers against the table. I was sitting alone at the small circular wood table with a rum and coke sitting before me. I took a sip and looked around the cheap excuse for a bar. The guy sitting just a few feet away from me smelled as if he had just smoked 2 packs before he walked in, and he was driving my senses nuts. If I didn't have a job to do, I would have left to go smoke, but I took another sip of my alcohol and watched my client. He was a college boy sitting with his friends unbeknownst to the event that was about to happen. I kept a close eye on him as one of his immature friends made a joke and the whole table laughed loud and unashamed. My client looked like he didn't want to be there, but gave a courtesy laugh to the joke anyway. I sighed and looked down at my watch, then back up at my client. I noticed that he excused himself from the table and walked over to the bartender, probably to order another round of drinks. I ran my hand through my dark red hair and stood up from my table, grabbing my drink. I could only think about how badly I wanted a cigarette as I passed the man who heavily smelled of smoke. I approached my client, who was currently waiting for the bartender to finish making his drinks. My client glanced over at me, then did a double take. He looked me up and down, then a wide grin appeared on his face. "Hello," he greeted, and I noted that he had a nice smile, probably due to years of dental work. I smiled back politely. "Hi. Can I help you?" He never let his grin falter. I glanced back over at his group of friends that seemed to be watching our every move. "Actually," I whispered, "I want to help you." "Oh?" He seemed surprised as took a seat on one of the bar stools. "How so?" I lowered my voice so only he could hear. "I know you don't want to be here, but your friends insisted that you come so they can get you out of this weird mood that you've been in lately." My client's eyebrows knitted together and he looked at me as if I was insane. "How do you know that?" I chose to ignore his question as the sound of the door opening caught my attention. A pretty blonde walked in with tear streaks down her cheeks, and I smirked. Right on time. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $20 bill and handed it to the man still staring at me confused. "Take this 20 and buy that girl over there a drink. Trust me, she needs one. Don't make any moves on her, just let her tell you her problem, though I'm sure she will be hesitant about it. Give her your number at the end of the night and recommend that she call it should she need someone to talk to." I shoved the bill into his hands. He looked at the girl, who was now sitting a few chairs away from UT and was currently ordering a drink. "Wait, what?" I rolled my eyes at him, then pointed to the girl. "I can't take your money." "You already did," I said, setting down my now empty glass. "Have a good night." I stood up from my chair, feeling the square pack of cigarettes in my pocket. "Wait," my client called, grabbing my arm. I gave him a glare and he let me go. "I don't even know your name." I forced a smile, more than ready to leave. "It's hers that you want to know." I walked over to the door, but before I pushed it open to leave, I turned around and watched as the guy looked down at the bill in his hands, then walked over to the distressed girl. "Hey, let me pay for your drink," he offered, putting a gentle hand on her back. I smiled to myself as I saw the girl nod slowly. I turned back around and shoved open the door, feeling the cold night air bite my skin. I took a few steps forward, letting the door slam behind me without care. I looked both ways on the street and noted that traffic was minimal, a very unusual sight to see in Brooklyn. I pulled out my pack of Camels and grabbed one from the 3 remaining in the pack. I sighed and shoved the rest of them back into my pocket. I grabbed my lighter from my other pocket and set the cigarette in between my lips. I flicked the lighter a few times, hoping to get the flame started, but nothing happened. "Damn it." I cursed aloud. I pulled the cigarette out of my mouth and ran a frustrated hand through my hair. I angrily shoved the lighter back into my pocket and looked down at the white circular addiction in my hands. I knew I needed to stop, because it was a disgusting habit, but I could never seem or want to. Need a light? A distinctive and heavenly voice came from behind me. I knew who it was before I even turned around to look. Following me at work now? I couldn't help but ask as I turned to face the voice. A man was standing there offering a flickering flame. I quickly lit my cigarette and took a long drag. It wasn't until I let out my breath of smoke that he spoke. Just making sure that you are doing everything correctly, Peyton. I began walking down the deserted street as my guest kept up with me. I'm not a kid, I stated, letting out another breath of smoke. I don't have to be babysat. Your methods are just very. The man drifted off and I came to an abrupt stop, different from mine. I gave a hard laugh. Everyone's methods are different from yours, Eros. Eros looked at me and the street lamp shined brightly on his face. He was a handsome man, no one could argue with that. He had dark brown curly hair and a well-chiseled face along with bright blue eyes. He didn't look a day over 30. Yes, Eros agreed. It's just that most of my employees wait to see if the people they match up actually click together. I'm the only employee related to you by blood, I pointed out, throwing my cigarette stub down on the ground and stomping it with my foot. It's in my DNA to know a good match when I make one. I shouldn't have to waste my time checking something that I know is right. You are just as stubborn as your mother, Eros said with a sigh, earning himself a glare. I am nothing like her, I practically hissed. You are more than you think, Eros muttered, but I ignored him. Is there something I can help you with? Yes, Eros said as if suddenly remembering why he had come. Your grandmother and I have an announcement. I raised my eyebrow. Okay? We wish to give it to you together, he continued as he began signaling for a cab. I looked down the empty street where not a car was in sight. Suddenly headlights appeared from the end of the street and as they approached us, a yellow car came into view. It stopped right in front of us and Eros opened the door for me. I slipped inside only to be joined by Eros a few seconds later. Harry. Eros greeted the driver. The boy, who couldn't be older than 25, turned around and smiled at us. Olympia Lane? Harry asked and Eros nodded in reply. Harry began driving and Eros felt inclined to have a light conversation. How is your grandfather, Harry? Old Hermes? Harry wondered aloud. Last I heard he's doing all right, still the messenger of the gods and all. I leaned against the window and watched the streets of Brooklyn slowly fade as we entered the home of the gods. Your grandfather is the messenger and you are the driver? I spoke up with interest. Just like your grandfather is Cupid and you are a matchmaker, Harry confirmed, and I glanced over at Eros. Don't call me her grandfather, he commanded. It makes me feel old. I scoffed. You are old. I don't look like I'm old, Eros countered. The advantages of being an immortal, Harry commented. I silently agreed as I felt the car come to a stop. Thank you, Harry. Eros said, stepping out of the car first, but holding the door open for me. I stepped out after him and waved goodbye to Harry. I looked around Olympia Lane, which looked similar to a regular suburb with large houses, white picket fences, and the whole perfect neighborhood look. The only difference was that the sky was not blue but white, making the whole place seem as if it was covered by clouds. I turned my attention to the house we were in front of, which was a light pink color. Every house was a different color and pink was always reserved for Cupid. I sighed as I thought of this place as my technical home. It was a rule that no immortals were allowed to live on Earth except one certain kind. The gods believed that it was too complicated for immortals to live normal mortal lives. We were however allowed to visit, especially when our job required it. I practically lived on Earth and stayed with my friend there, but my technical home was on Olympia Lane with my grandparents. Eros walked up the steps to his home and knocked once before entering. I followed behind him and he announced our arrival. Has Peyton come with you? I heard a sweet female voice call out. Yes, dear, Eros assured, shrugging off his coat and hanging it up. Suddenly a woman appeared in the hallway and looked at me with bright green eyes. She had the same deep red hair that I had and looked about the age of Eros. "Oh Peyton," she said, engulfing me in a hug. "We've missed you. You stay away far too long." "Sorry Grandma," I apologized as we broke apart. Unlike Eros, Psyche liked her title of Grandma no matter what age she appeared to be. "Shall we take Peyton into the living room?" Eros suggested. Psyche nodded and led me into the living room, which was brightly decorated in all different shades of pink and red. I sat down on one of the plush love seats and Psyche and Eros took a seat together in another. "Does everything in your house have to be Valentine-themed?" I asked as I moved aside the many heart pillows. "It is my holiday," Eros bragged, and I rolled my eyes. "Your grandfather has an announcement," Psyche stated excitedly. "What is it, Grandpa Eros?" I teased. He gave me a little glare before he stood. "Psyche believes that my job takes away from our life together, and with the world's population only going up, I have barely been home." "Okay, but you have a lot of employees, so it isn't like you're making all the matches yourself." "While that is true," Eros continued, brushing off my comment, "I still have to manage all of them and make sure what they do is correct. It takes away a lot of my time." "Time?" I asked with a laugh. "We are all immortal. All of us in this room will live forever. There should be no question about time." "Regardless," Eros continued, annoyed at my constant interruptions, "I've decided that I want to retire from this business and leave all my work to my successor." Eros seemed to let that settle in for a minute as he returned to his seat next to Psyche. I couldn't help myself because the next thing I knew, I was laughing. "This is not a joke," Eros whined, obviously hurt that I was not taking him seriously. I gained control of my giggles and managed to ask, "What are you going to do for the rest of eternity?" "Spend some time with my family and maybe one will pick up a hobby." Eros shrugged. "You can't retire." I practically yelled as I realized that he meant everything he was saying. "You're Cupid. What are we going to do when Valentine's Day comes around?" Eros glanced at Psyche, who was giving him an encouraging smile. "It will all be your responsibility," he proclaimed. "What?" I asked, standing in alarm. Eros grabbed my shoulders in an attempt to calm me. "You are my successor. I will pass on the business to you." "Whoa." I took a step away from him. "I didn't even want this job to begin with. What makes you think I want the whole business handed over to me?" "Oh dear," Psyche muttered while standing with us. "We are not just going to hand it over to you." I raised an eyebrow and Eros explained. "You have one test to pass before I feel comfortable letting you run the business." "What?" I was almost afraid to ask. Eros left the room for a few minutes, and when he returned he held a folder in his hands. "It's a tough case, but I'm sure you can handle it. It is one that will take time and I don't have to retire tomorrow because, as you said, I have all eternity. If you can successfully match this person with his proper mate, then I will gladly hand over the business to you." Eros shoved the case file in my hands. I shook my head. "I don't want the business." "You might change your mind," Psyche tried her best to convince. "This will take you a long time to complete, so maybe you will come around to the idea before it is finished." I looked at them both doubtfully. I've never had to take long with a case before. Eros seemed happy with the change in subject. "Yes, but this is dealing with an immortal." "An immortal?" I wondered. "On Earth?" "Yes," Psyche said dreamily. "A fallen angel looking for love. Immortals have to be paired with other immortals," I recited the old rule. Eros nodded. "Yes, that is why this case will take time. There are not many immortals in the world to choose from and most are in hiding." "Really now," I said, flipping open the folder. "How hard could it be?"